if you're looking at a property strategy that can help people, maybe tenant buyer is something that you could do.
Yeah, so my big vision is to do as much tenant buyer as I can, make a good return, and help somebody get on the property ladder as well.
It's great to share all the great stories of great results and stuff, but property is challenging at times.
I had a tenant just abandon the property. The rent didn't get paid. So I went round to the property and found it in a really bad state.
Hi, Kevin McDonald here and welcome to the Progressive Property Podcast. On this week's episode of the podcast, I'm joined by Chris Irvin. Now, Chris has been investing in property for a couple of years now, and he's got 4 properties up and running using different techniques. So I thought it'd be really helpful to share with you on the podcast how he secured those deals, the type of techniques he's using, and his experiences so far on his property journey. So, Chris, thanks for coming in to join us.
No problem. Nice to see you.
So, I guess property investing, you've been doing it now for how many years?
About 4 years with a kind of real focus on actual investing.
And prior to that, what were you doing?
So I'm still working in my day job. So I work for Yamaha Music. Music's kind of one of my passions as well. I have always had an interest in property. So I kind of did a couple of flips without realising I was doing flips.
Right.
One of them you could probably even call an assisted sale. It was my grandparents' house that my dad had inherited, and I kind of came up with this idea that I would live in it for 9 months and renovate it, and then we'd split the profits. Obviously at the time I didn't know that was a strategy.
Yeah.
If it hadn't have been for the crash of 2008-9, it would have been very profitable. Unfortunately, it was actually worth more before I started than it was when I finished it. Of course, the nice thing was the market had changed at the same time as well. So what I was able to buy afterwards with the profit was better than what I could have bought beforehand.
Okay, yeah, true. So so if you sold it at a higher price, you'd have had to buy it at a higher price.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you sold it at a lower price, but bought it at a lower price.
Yeah, and my dad still did okay out of it as well.
Good stuff. Music. What do you do in music?
So, from a professional point of view, I'm kind of a marketing guy, dealing in the live side of things. From a personal point of view, I have quite a varied interest in music. I play bass in a band. We write our own music, and I also write my own songs as well.
Do you need a lead singer or anything?
Definitely. Do you know anyone?
No. Supposedly the Irish can sing. I'm just not sure I can.
Yeah. So that's something I really love doing, and it's something that I would credit my journey in property to actually allowing me to develop, because I guess I'm kind of a modest guy and I don't feel like I'm very good, but through kind of the mindset growth that I've enjoyed over the last few years, it's kind of just allowed me to let go a bit and just try stuff, and also to leverage other people. So in my role, I know some incredible musicians. So when I go into the studio to record stuff, rather than me trying to do everything, I'll actually pull people in that are much more talented.
Right.
And the results are excellent.
Yeah, you got to surround yourself with people that know things you don't know.
Yeah, in all walks of life,
You did those couple of flips sort of, I guess, late 2000s, early 2010s?
It was early 2000s. So the first one was just a house I bought, and I did a little bit of light refurb on it, just kind of, making things look nicer. Obviously the property prices rocketed around that time, so we made quite a bit of uplift on that. Then I went and did the assisted sale, where that sort of kept me busy for a year. Then off the back of that, I bought a family home with my new wife at the time, and we spent a few years kind of adding value to that. Did a complete back to brick refurb on that, even took the roof off and put it back on. So learned quite a lot along the way. And
then sort of 4 years ago you decided you were going to buy and hold.
Yeah, so it kind of happened by accident. We lived in a semi-detached, and it was the really nice street. We bought the worst house in the best street. Again, something I didn't know about. We did it by accident, so we added quite a lot of value. But we always joked that if the neighbours ever sold, we'd buy their house and knock the two into one. Anyway, we found out through another neighbour that they were selling, So I went round and knocked on the door and asked, how much do you want for the house?
So direct to vendor.
Direct to vendor. See all this stuff? I didn't need Progressive. I just did it all myself. Unfortunately, when I then spoke to my lender, they advised that they wouldn't lend on a adjoining property.
Right.
So I went and told the neighbour, and they said, "Oh, you should talk to our financial advisor." So I did that, and that conversation was probably the biggest eye opener for me ever, because he was the one that told me about leveraging, about remortgaging our house, getting money out. He also advised that buying the next door neighbour's house was a ridiculous idea, because it had an awful yield on it. So he then put me on to my gold mine area, I suppose. We were living in a town called Leighton Buzzard, which is just south of Milton Keynes. The prices there were pretty high and going up, so the yield was very low. Milton Keynes was also similar, but Northampton, the next town along, was a lot lower purchasing price. So we had an opportunity to fund 3 or 4 houses at the time. Unfortunately, my wife didn't buy in, not for the 4 full houses, so we actually compromised and bought 2.
Right.
This was about 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago. Of course, 6 months in, we bought the houses. They weren't BRRs, they were just ready to go. We bought nice houses, tenant went straight in. They started making about £250, £300 a month profit each. Which was okay for us. We're both working. We didn't know about big yields and stuff like that. We were just kind of thinking for the future, I suppose. But of course, she saw the profit and then said, "All right, can we get the other 2 now?" And I'm like, "Well, we can't, because we're locked into a 5-year fixed mortgage." Anyway, we did a bit of jiggery pokery. We took a bit of extra borrowing on one of the buy-to-lets. Managed to find one more deposit. Bought our 3rd property. Which again did really well. Moved a tenant the day I bought it. Actually, the day we completed, the tenant moved in.
At what point did you find Progressive?
So this was quite a turn of events, actually. So this was 2018. We bought the 3rd property, and my marriage then fell apart, unfortunately. So I went through quite a turbulent time. I went off the rails, if I'm honest. Put the whole property thing to one side and just dealt with life. And I was just coming through the back of that, and I remember having a chat with my then boss. We were walking around the lake, and I was asking his advice. What would you do? Because I had to make a decision whether to keep the rental properties or whether to keep the residential house where I was living. I politely asked my wife to leave, and we were sharing our children, so it was still their family home, and I did have quite a lot of mixed feelings about whether to keep their home or whether to think more towards the future and about building a bit of a legacy for them. Anyway, after flip-flopping my mind for quite a number of years, for about 18 months, I then had this conversation with my boss, and he said, "Keep the house, definitely keep the house. You can find more rental properties later down the line." And about half an hour later, I made my decision to sell the house and keep the portfolio. Not because his advice was bad; it just made things very clear for me. It was the conversation I needed to have. This was January 2020. Right. That very same week, by sheer coincidence, I saw an advert. I don't know if it was on Instagram or Facebook, but it was for Progressive Masopi, and I signed up for it, and that was in February 2020.
So that's the multiple streams of property income 3-day event.
Yeah, that was down in London, so I signed up for that. And I went there and I vowed that I wasn't going to spend any money. By the end of the Friday, I'd signed up to Anne Holton's course, and by the end of the Sunday, I'd signed up to VIP. So my willpower of not spending any money was pretty awful. But I never looked back. I think a month later, I came to it was an event that yourself and the other Kevin did, and I signed up to your no money down then, which I wasn't able to do for quite a long time actually. Yeah. So we did an online one at one point.
If you're looking to start in property, if you're looking to scale your property investment, then there is a completely free report that you can download in the descriptions and the pinned comments that can help you get started on your property investment journey. Because the lockdown, all that happened at that point then.
Yeah, the lockdown happened, and about a month into the lockdown, Rob launched the Emergency Mastermind, which was the Sunday evening 6-month course, that was absolutely the best thing I've ever done. That was brilliant.
That got people through the pandemic, didn't it?
It got us through the pandemic, but for me and the timing, it just helped me in so many areas of my life. It was a real kind of mindset thing, and to have access to all the different mentors and all their different strategies and just the different learnings, and also the mentees within that group as well. You know, we're all still friends. You know, I've joined lots of WhatsApp groups through the different property strategies I've done, but that's kind of the one group that's still very much active.
I think that's something that I come across a lot with people when I speak to them is the training is the training. Obviously it gives you the knowledge and there's loads of content and you learn lots of stuff. That's a given. But one of the things that keeps coming back to is the people you meet. So how important has other progressive property mentees, other students been to you, to your journey, to helping you, keep going and overcome challenges and just be there for you, etc.?
It's been the best. I mean, there's such a diverse mix of people that I've met. There's some that are absolutely smashing it. There's some that started with nothing and they've accelerated really quickly. There's others that have done very little, but they're still doing this. They're still going. They're still trying. And there are a few that have just disappeared, and you wonder where they are. But yeah, I've made some amazing friends. But I think what I take away the most from it is just the inspiration you get. Certain people, and it's not necessarily the ones that are absolutely killing it. It's just the different attitudes that you see. You can draw so much from it, and those that are willing to help as well. There's a lot of people that are so generous with their time and their knowledge, and just putting the proverbial arm around you when times are hard. But also from an individual perspective, being able to actually reach out to them and ask for help.
I think for me it's so critical because it keeps you going when you'd otherwise potentially maybe quit on your own.
Yeah, totally.
So your property, so you've got the initial property's you've got another property now. Strategy wise, so what have you done with the properties? Because when you started back 4 years ago, it was single let buy to let. So are you still running them as single let buy to lets, or what are you doing with your properties?
So I've now got four properties that I own. 2 of them are run as standard buy-to-lets. One of them I manage privately. The other one is still with the agent, but I will be taking that back soon. Because no disrespect to agents in general, but my particular agent aren't doing anything. I speak to the tenant directly, so whenever there's a problem, we just sort it out directly. The third buy-to-let, I have actually let to a tenant buyer now. So this kind of happened off the back of a disaster. So back in December 21, which is coming up to a year ago now, isn't it? I had a tenant just abandon the property. Like the rent didn't get paid on the 1st of December, and I phoned the agent and they said, we'll follow it up. And then they called me back and said, the tenant's just been in and handed the keys in, she's moved out. I'm like, what? So I went round to the property and found it in a really bad state. I actually posted on the Progressive site, so there is pictures of it, how it was left. Loads of furniture left there, loads of damp everywhere. And I was obviously a month's rent down. With no notice to remarket it either. I was skint as well at the time, so I had no money to put things right. I was in a bit of a pickle, to be honest. So I took a bit of time to kind of work out what I was going to do. I managed to borrow some funds from my dad and a good friend of mine. Managed to put the property right during January, and I made the decision that off the back of that I was actually going to do the tenant buyer strategy, which is something I learnt from yourself, and it's something I feel really passionate about helping people get onto the property ladder. So I followed your marketing advice. I made a homemade sign and stuck it on the side of the wall of the house. The neighbour came out and laughed at me, and my mate who was with me helping me laughed at me. And sure enough, before the next evening, the phone had already started ringing. I also put a post on the local renting Facebook group, and between the two, I ended up with about 48 phone calls.
You can laugh at the neighbour now then.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, especially with the tenant I've put in there.
Yeah. So what's the structure of the deal? How's it work?
So the structure of the deal, so the guy, it was a classic case of somebody that has a good job, but has bad credit. He had a previous relationship, ended up with a CCJ, so he can't get a mortgage for a number of years.
CCJ, for anyone listening, County Court Judgment. So,
I'm glad I said it right, actually. I sometimes say CSD and things like that. So he's in there for 7 years. We've agreed an uplift on the purchase. So I bought the property originally at 194. It's currently valued around 230, 235. He's buying it in 7 years for 260. I have no doubt that the property would be worth way more than that in 7 years' time. But from my perspective, I actually advertised it as a 5-year deal, but his situation needed 7 years. So I was like, okay, that's great for me because it means I get another 2 years rent paid. I got a nice little uplift on the rent I was getting, so an extra £200 a month on the rent I was getting, which from his perspective is great because it's fixed for 7 years. I'm not intending to put the rent up. From my perspective, I no longer have to pay the agent's fees. I no longer have to cover maintenance or the cosmetic maintenance, and I don't have to worry about voids. So what it's actually done for me is taken away the stress of have I got the right tenant in there, B, it's more than doubled the income I was making off of that property, and C, I don't know what C is.
C is you're smiling. And you said about 260. You mentioned a valid point there of I'm selling it to him for 260 in 7 years, and I've no doubt it'll be worth more. But then you mentioned that you've doubled your income, so there's no voids, so you're not worried about any more empty periods, so that's income. There's no management fee, so you're saving money with the letting agents every single month, and the rent you're getting a couple of £100 more than you were.
More than that, actually. It's about £300 a month more.
Right, so £300 a month over 12 months is 3,600, £3,500 a year. For 7 years is 25-6 grand-ish. So that's 26-ish grand that you would be able to add on to the purchase price, which makes it maybe it's 260, but you've made 26 grand that you would have not made from a tenant, which is kind of means it'd have to be worth over 286 to lose. But there's still no voids, no maintenance, no management fees, no hassle. Solved your situation.
And help somebody out.
So if you're looking at a property strategy that can help people, maybe tenant buyer is something that you could do. Are you going to do more of them?
I am, yeah. So my big vision is to just basically do as much tenant buyer as I can. Obviously, I can't buy all the properties myself, but what I found is there's a lot of people I've been talking to. Some of them are friends, some of them are colleagues. They really love the strategy. Some of them love it because they want help getting onto the property ladder. Others have got money that they are interested to invest, and they really like the idea that they can make a good return and help somebody get on the property ladder as well.
And being able to show people a case study example of one you've done as well is really helpful.
That was kind of the turning point for me. So
you've also done serviced accommodation recently?
So that's another interesting kind of change of direction for me as well. So the sort of last quarter of last year, I had another property which I'd recently purchased. It didn't need a lot of work doing, it just needed a bit of a light refurb. A couple of the rooms needed plastering. I was getting towards the end of it, And at the same time, I was trying to purchase another property which was really run down. It was a BRR, or it's going to be a BRR, so buy, refurbish, refinance. Needed a very heavy refurb. Because of the state of the property, it wasn't mortgageable at the time. I had to get bridging finance to fund it, which requires some very specific surveys. Surveys were done and brought up a couple of potential problems, which the bridging company didn't like. So I then had to get an architecture to go around or a structural engineer to go around and look at it. In the meantime, the vendor and the estate agent were getting very twitchy, and when I said I need to get a structural engineer to go around, they kind of lost their patience and pulled out on the deal, which for me was pretty terrible because I'd already refinanced two of my own properties early. So I'd paid redemption penalties to release some funds to pay the deposit. And I'd paid for the surveys, and I'd paid the broker the first instalment on the commercial finance. The deal, which I lost, cost me around 6k, which I'm quite a planner. So I've got this very kind of detailed business plan or financial plan or life plan, whatever you want to call it, and this hiccup really threw me back from a financial perspective and also from the number of properties I wanted to own. So I had to make a quite bold decision of what to do with this buy-to-let that I was currently in the final stages of refurbing. Because if I was going to do it as a buy-to-let, I could have just done it straight away and let it out, and made my £200 a month, and made a tenant happy. Or I could risk a bit more and furnish it as a serviced accommodation and see how it got on. Now the problem I had was it was just a very typical terraced house in the middle of Northampton, not a particularly nice street, not particularly nice area. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. So what I did, I teamed up with a guy who does serviced accommodation in the Milton Keynes area. He was a guy I'd met 2 years previously at my first PPN, actually, Progressive Property Network event. And I just said to him, can you analyse this deal and see if you think it would work? And he did, and he was like, yeah, I think it's going to work. So we went for it. This was finally ready on February the 5th, I think it was. We went live. Right. By the 7th, we had our first tenant move in. For the first 4 months, I think we were operating on about 97% occupancy. Wow. So it absolutely blew my mind, and it turned my finances around massively. In January, with the previous property I mentioned, the tenant buyer one, and this one both being empty, I had 4 properties. 2 of them were empty for a good 3-4 months, plus all the building costs and the furnishing costs. I'd borrowed so much money. I had credit cards that needed paying, tax bills that needed paying as well, and I was on my knees. At one point in January, I was thinking I might just need to sell up and get out. So for this to turn round quite quickly was amazing. It really was amazing. I was quite emotional about it. I remember at the PPA, the Progressive Property Academy, getting up. It was the first time I'd got up on stage, and I sort of put my hand up and said, "Oh yeah, I've had a challenge and a success this month," and told everybody what I'd done. And it was great, to see the reaction, but also to tell the story of how bad it was, because I think there's a lot of people that are very happy to tell you when it's good. But it was a pretty dark time. I was just really grateful, I had my best friend from school who was able to lend me some money. My dad was able to lend me some money, and I actually paid them both back this week from the profits. So
one of the reasons I wanted to interview you as well and talk to you on the podcast is share this story, because a lot of people think properties get rich quick and you just learn about property and everything is going to go smoothly, etc. But it's challenges, it's obstacles, and that's why I always say to people right from the first time they meet me, your mindset's the key bit, because the mindset is what will keep you going in the difficult times, and the people around you. So I guess with all of those challenges and wanting to quit, what would you say to anyone who's maybe struggling at the moment on their property journey? Maybe they've tried to get going, they're struggling to get that first deal through, or they maybe have a deal but they've had a problem tenant, or something's not going quite how they hoped it would or expected it would. What sort of advice would you give them?
Breathe. Seek advice from people around you, people that know what they're doing. Not just people around you, Bob down the pub. Don't talk to him because he doesn't know. He might know, but he probably won't. And just look at all the options. I mean, the serviced accommodation story for me was great. I had no intention of doing serviced accommodation. I still have no intention of doing it, but I leveraged somebody that I know that does it, who I trust.
Work smart.
And we've also done a JV rent to rent as well together since.
Right.
So, it's make use of the people around you.
What about anyone who's listening to this and thinking, oh my God, lost $6,000 on a deal that you were hoping to buy and didn't buy, etc. Property sounds really risky. I'm not going to get going. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to just continue to do what I'm already doing. I'm going to stay where I am. What would you say to anyone who's thinking, why would you keep going having lost money in a deal? I don't want to do that too.
Well, it comes down to what you want to do as a person, I suppose. I've always played life quite safe, I think, and over the last 3 or 4 years, I have changed the direction of how I think. I've become a lot more ambitious. I still believe I'm quite cautious. I know there's a lot of people in the property game who are going very quick. I've seen loads of them fly past me, but I have a plan and it's on target. So the other thing I didn't mention was by doing these 2 deals, I actually hit my financial goal for 2022 in April.
Awesome.
So
in April of 22.
In April of 2022. So the rest of the year is now gearing up to getting ahead for 2023, and that was to equal my salary through property. So it was no small goal. So
even with all those setbacks, with all those challenges, property I always say is a roller coaster. It's up and down. You'll always have challenges. Yeah. Is it worth it?
For me, it's worth it.
In what way?
The challenges are actually what makes it interesting, I think. If there was no challenges, it would be great because you could make money out of it, but it would be quite boring. So I think it is that you get a great buzz from it. When stuff goes right, you do get a great buzz from it. The one thing I would say, which was something I experienced when things did go right for me in February and March, I didn't have anybody to share that success with at the time. I didn't have a partner at the time that I could share that with. I found that really lonely. I find when things are going bad for you, if you've got your masterminds and you've got your mentors and stuff, you do have people that you can lean on. Yeah. But what really struck me as odd was when I did have this success, and I had the bottle of champagne that I won from you actually.
Right, yeah.
I didn't have anybody to drink it with, so I held on to it. And I have met a lovely lady since, and we've enjoyed that together. But having somebody or people to share it with is really key
to the
for
journey.
me. For me anyway.
I think it is for everybody. Is trying to go through life alone in anything. I tried doing property alone at the start, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And being around those like-minded people, it just gives you a boost. And that be people at masterminds, yes, but obviously when you go home, it's good to have people around you at home as well.
Yeah.
So, what's next then? You said you've set your goal. You've hit your goal for 2022 already. Now it's setting up for 2023 and getting ahead. What's the 2023, 4 and onwards goal? Where is Chris going?
So I want to develop the tenant buyer business is kind of my long-term strategy. I do enjoy the serviced accommodation side of things now. I really love setting up the properties. I've got a great interior designer I'm working with, so we kind of share the labour side of things, but she's got a lot of the vision, and then I'm quite creative as well, so I throw in a few ideas, but I really like that. obviously like the cash flow it brings. I am a little bit sceptical that I think it's I think the government are going to change
the
how
law.
that little piggy bank works at some point. So I'm looking at properties with, will it SA today, and can it be a tenant buyer tomorrow?
Yeah.
Because the nice thing with doing that as well is you can build up some equity in the property whilst it's serviced accommodationing. And then when you get to the point of doing it as a tenant buyer, you've already built up that buffer of equity. So when you do say, okay, this is what it's worth today, this is what you can buy it for in 3-5 years time, there's a significant jump there. So you can make a bit of money on it. I'm looking to do that with investors. So I've got a few investors I'm talking to at the minute, friends and family. Some of them are obvious choices. Others were people that, oh, I didn't know you knew what I was doing. So that's something that I know a lot of people in this community would say is tell people what you do.
Yeah.
You really don't know who's looking at what you're doing. So if you're not telling them what you're doing, they're never going to know.
Never going to know.
One of the nicest things I like is, and it's happened a few times, I'll just be walking down the street and somebody will just jokingly say, oh, what are you up to? You off to buy another house, or you're running a marathon or whatever? It's just like, oh, you've never commented on any of my posts before. So, because I think there is a little bit of a vanity when you post something on social media. It's like if you don't get much of a response, you consider it a failure. But yeah, in the background there are people
watching.
Yeah, definitely.
What sort of top 2 or 3 tips would you give people who are thinking about getting started in property?
God, there's loads of stuff. So for me, I'm a big planner. So I have my long-term plan where I want to be in the future. I have my mid-term plan where I want to be in 3 years' time, and I have my short-term plan, which for me, I'm using a book called the 12-week year.
Yeah.
So I've got my next 3 months all mapped out, prioritising my goals, and each one of these goals is kind of a stepping stone to get towards the big picture. So that would be my first bit of advice: is have a plan, write it down, because once it's written down, it becomes a lot easier to focus on. The second bit of advice I would give is linked to that, and it's about do something every day, however small it is, that moves you forwards towards where you want to be. There's that famous Chinese saying about one step, well, this is the first step of the 1,000-mile walk, or whatever, I can't remember. I absolutely nailed that saying, didn't I?
Yeah.
I like to think of it as walking up a mountain. If you're going to walk up a mountain, you don't look at the summit and say, oh my God, there's such a big task. But if you just look at the first base and make your way towards the first base, then it's a bite-sized chunk. It's very doable. And also to celebrate that. When you get to that, celebrate it, because you have to enjoy the journey. If you're just waiting to get to the summit before you celebrate, you might die. You might die on the way, and then what was the point?
Yeah.
So, have a little dance on the way, have a little bottle of champagne, enjoy it, definitely. Find accountability, whether that be in yourself. I use social media primarily to hold myself accountable. I tell people what I'm intending to do, especially on my health and fitness, because if I don't do that, it's so easy to not train.
Not do it.
But if I tell people, oh, I'm doing this challenge and I'm training towards it, if they know I'm doing that and I don't do it, then I feel like an idiot. Find accountability, whether that be in yourself or with a mentor, with a mastermind group. That would probably be my
Awesome.
key bits of advice.
Well, that's felt like a few minutes. We've been talking for almost an hour, probably 45-ish minutes. So I think the audience, everyone's going to absolutely love this episode, because it's going to resonate with a lot of people who face challenges. And one of the reasons I want to bring you in here is it's great to share all the great stories of great results and stuff, but property is challenging at times, and it's about keeping going through those challenges. So well bloody done. It's been a pleasure for me to get to know you over the last couple of years, and I know this is just the beginning for you. But for other people to get to know you, how can they reach out to you? How can they follow you? How can they keep track of your journey? So where do they go?
Best place to get hold of me is on Facebook. So it's Chris Irvin on Facebook, and you'll find me. I'm in the progressive property community as well from time to time.
Awesome. So you've been listening to the Progressive Property Podcast. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We are out every single Tuesday. Also, go to the Progressive Property community. There's over 40,000 property investors in there on Facebook. Join the community and meet like-minded people just like Chris. I'm in there as well, giving advice and support all the time, as is people like Chris and many others. You've been listening, as I said, to the Progressive Property Podcast. I've been Kevin McDonald. He's been Chris Irving. You've been amazing, and I'll see you next time.